Hello, everyone. My name is Janai Thornton, and welcome to our estate planning CMO, our Chief Money Officer chat. And if you're here, that means you are already a member of our Thank Me Later community, because there was no other way that you were going to get in. And that is by design. But we are grateful that you're here, and also grateful that you have a place. Now, we as Black women, we have a place to get the information that we need so we can all be confident, very equipped chief money officers. Because, one thing I know about that role, most of us inherited the role. No one really signed up for the role, and certainly no one trained us for the job, but we have the job. So at Thank Me Later, we are committed to making sure that you are going to be confident in this role. And not only in the role, we also want to make sure that you're equipped for life events, because what I've noticed is one life event can really change the course of your entire life, particularly your financial life, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And so it may be new to you, but it's not new. Like they say, there's nothing new under the sun. So we're committed to making sure that you are able to navigate all of these different life events. So tonight, again, it's about estate planning, and it's not by mistake. This is by design, because our entire theme for August is all about these important legal documents. So I'm talking about your wills, your power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorneys. Like, we have to have these. And because we're preparing for a potential life event, maybe you might become disabled, or someone you love might, but certainly, not to make light of it, none of us are getting out of here alive. So we're going to have a plan for that. And we really need to be very proactive about that. But we can't have a session like this without a subject matter expert. So our SME, our subject matter expert for tonight, is Miss Tiffany McKenzie.
Hello, hello.
I am so grateful that you're here.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm happy that you're here, and thank you for being so generous with your time.
Of course.
And just to tell you a little bit about Tiffany, before I brag about Tiffany, please make sure that you follow her. So you can follow her at Tiffany.n.McKenzie. And so we will certainly share this information with you a little later on as well. But Tiffany is an estate attorney. So we all have to remember, lawyers and attorneys are like doctors. They specialize. So when we're talking about wills and power of attorneys and all of that stuff, we need to be talking to specifically an estate attorney. So Tiffany is that. She's a partner with the firm Harrison Held. And one thing that I really have a lot of respect for Harrison Held is because they focus on estate planning, which is huge. I don't know any other firm in the country that does that. Tiffany also is the attorney who helped me and my family get our legal documents together. We just went through all of this October of last year. So wait a minute, let me show you my stuff. Here's my healthcare power of attorney. I brought them, and my power of attorney, literally Tiffany just helped my family get our stuff updated October of 2020. So I recently just went through this. But one thing that I wanted to share about Tiffany is I have a lot of respect for you as a Black woman, because you are a woman who lives in And what I mean by that is, beyond being an attorney, Tiffany is also an entrepreneur. So for those of us who live in Atlanta, if you've heard of Vibe Rides, Tiffany also is an owner of 3 locations, 2 in Atlanta, 1 is in Midtown and Grant Park, and 1 in Detroit, Michigan. So, okay, Atlanta people, please take advantage of that. And then also she's owner of 4 Perspire sauna studios. So they're all in Atlanta: Buckhead, Sandy Springs, Virginia Highlands, and 1 is coming to East Cobb soon. Wow.
I know, doing a lot. Living in the and, as you said.
Living in and, for sure. So again, very grateful for you to be here and be so generous with your time. So we're going to just kind of go over some general estate planning stuff initially. And then from there, this is a working session. This is our first Thank Me Later working session. So we shared with you where to get the forms. People don't understand, there is a different form literally for each state.
Every single state.
Right.
Yes. We are going to do our best to kind of give you some generalizations of all of the the intricate parts of the form, but we do want to keep in mind that there are different forms for each state. And I'll kind of talk through where that can actually be of significance, but keep that in mind as we're going through these today.
Yeah. And so that means we are not just going to be able to go through Georgia or North Carolina. I see some folks from New York.
Ohio.
I know, Ohio. You all are from everywhere. Yeah. And we're super grateful that you're here. But please make sure you're downloading the forms that are in your state. You need to download the forms that are in your state. So go ahead on and do that. You can print them to PDF. But Tiffany and I are just going to begin to have some discussion about estate planning as a whole, because we know y'all are going to need a minute to get access to those forms. Because our goal for you really at the end of this session is that you actually can get these forms completed.
Yes.
And then Tiffany is going to let you know the proper way to get them signed, notarized, witnessed.
Yep.
There's another step. You can't just finish with us and put the form away or email it to your sister or your mother. You're not done. You're not done until they've been properly signed and executed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's very important. Make sure that you actually do that final step, is getting them signed, witnessed, and notarized if need be in your particular state.
Okay. So go ahead, ladies, and get your forms downloaded. First, I also want to take a minute and say thank you to the entire Thank Me Later team. So all the other people on this side that you don't see. So Tiana is working the chat. Ani is over here working the slides. My husband David is here holding down all things IT and camera. So it is certainly a group effort. David is shaking his head like, no, I'm not. Also, thank you to Kime, who's not even in the office with us, who helped pull this together. So thank you to the TML team. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, because I know there's a few general things we need to go over to make sure people know all this estate planning stuff. I know this is a lot.
It is a lot.
This can be a very heavy and difficult topic for people.
It gets very difficult to talk about death, incapacity, not being able to care for yourself.
Right.
We know as Black women that we try and conquer it all,
right.
But sometimes you are going to need help.
Right.
And how are we going to make sure that we've got our legal documents in place if anything is to happen to you? Who's going to take care of your family, your loved ones, all of that?
Right. Yeah. So their decisions, it sounds heavy, but I just want you to know that it's doable. And I need you to know that this is necessary. Like, there is no greater gift that you can give your family, and there's no greater gift that your family that can give to you than to actually execute all of these documents.
Right.
Okay. So where are we starting?
We are going to really start with the why.
Okay.
We're going to discuss why estate planning is important. Often when you talk about estate planning, people think about a will. That's usually all people ever think about. They think about a will, or they think about probate.
Right.
Estate planning is so much more than that. It's how are you taking care of your children? It's do you have businesses that you need to make sure that you have a good business succession in place? Do you have the right people to come into your businesses to take over for you? How do you make sure that you've got the right people in place if anything was to happen to you? Let's, God forbid, you get in a coma or a vegetative state. Who are the people that are going to be in place then? It's not just what happens when you die.
Right.
There's a lot of things that happen while you're still alive that is under that umbrella of estate planning. Even protecting your assets from liability. What happens if you get sued someday?
Right.
How are you protecting your assets so that they can continue to go on to your family members and your loved ones? So when you hear the words estate planning, I want you to think more than just a will, because it's so much more than that.
Right.
But I wanted to go through some of these slides and really discuss, why it's important that you plan. And I've got the slides broken up in many different statuses. So if you're single, or if you're single with children, if you're married with children, just so that we can kind of go through what might be your particular status and why it would be important to you.
Okay.
So as you see right now, some of the main reasons for planning. Controlling and timing the manner of distributions. Let's say you've got young kids,
right,
and something happens to you, God forbid you pass away. The last thing you want is a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old to get millions of dollars, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Or even maybe even a 20-year-old.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So making sure that we can plan as to the timing and the manner of how your assets are going to be distributed.
Okay.
Also, naming guardians for your children. So
That's
if something
huge.
was going to happen to you, who are going to be the guardians of your children? That's very important. One of the biggest reasons to do estate planning if you have minor children. Minimizing taxes could also be a possibility. Right now, the estate tax exemption amount is very high. It's about $11.5 million. Not everybody has that. We all wish we do.
Right. Right.
But if you are around that, minimizing taxes could be a very important reason to do estate planning. And then we have creditor protection. The last thing you want, like I said, is to have liability or surrounding the assets that you've worked so hard for to get over your life. The last thing you want is anyone to take that from you. And you might even have philanthropic considerations. So if you tithe to your church every weekend and you want to make sure they get a sum of money upon your death.
Right.
If you've got charities that you give to often, making sure that they're involved and are a part of your estate plan. So those are some big overarching reasons for planning. I want to go through the next slide.
One thing that I wanted to add when you just talk about that is I talk to a lot of Black women who feel that because they don't have millions of dollars, that they don't need to do this.
Correct.
And so other than people with young children or maybe people who have adult children who may have disabilities. So what I hear you saying is if you own a house, if you have a bank account, if you have a retirement account, you need to do this.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you've got a blended family, you need to do this.
Absolutely.
This is a huge reason. The last thing you want, and something that I see quite often, is the drama that surrounds the grieving process with death.
Right.
And people will act a fool.
Right.
Okay.
And we all know that.
Yes.
Yeah, we all know that.
So if we can have in writing
Right.
exactly what's supposed to be done, who's supposed to take care of it, you
Right.
alleviate a lot of that drama.
Right.
You make it easier to just grieve the death of a loved one.
Right.
So
Right.
yes, absolutely. It's I would say 99.5% of Americans need to be doing estate planning. Unfortunately, less than 50% do.
Right.
So let that not be one of you all, please. Okay. If you are married with minor children, here are some reasons why you might want to do estate planning. Like we said before, naming a guardian, possibly naming a trustee to handle that manner and the timing of distribution of assets to your children.
When the kids get the money, when you think that they're capable
exactly
to get the money, yes.
Giving your spouse possibly the right to control those assets and possibly control how that manner and timing goes to your children. And also to postpone past 18 when children couldn't get any inheritances. So that's the big reasons if you're married with minor children why you might want to do estate planning.
Right. And one thing that I wanted to add that I learned going through the process with you was David and I have young adult children that we were still able to say, hey, if something happens to both of us, we don't want them to get all the money at one time, but when they buy a house, when they get married, if they go to graduate school, here are some of the here's some triggers for them to get money, and then also staggering it over certain ages. At 30, they get this amount, or 40, just because I have seen money ruin children. And families when they get too much at once.
Absolutely.
So again, maybe I am trying to control from the grave to some degree, but at least I feel like I'm setting my kids up for success.
Absolutely. And I tell clients all the time, as long as it's legal, we can draft it.
Right.
So I've got clients who come to me and they say, I don't want my kids to get a dime if they don't get a prenup. Okay. Right. We can write that.
Right.
I've had clients who come to me and say, if my kid becomes a Republican, they get nothing. That I can't so much hold up. But things like that if it's legal, we can write it. The sky's the limit. So we've got clients that'll even say, I want to match my children's salary. So if they're making $50,000 a year, I'm going to match that. Maybe I'll match it to 10% or 50%.
Right.
If they graduate from college, if they get married, if they buy a house, if they start a business, these are big milestones in which we can dictate when children get distributions.
Right. And so, ladies, one thing I want you to think about, you may not have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, but if you have life insurance, and that's a $500,000 policy or $300,000 policy, if you do not want your children to get that $300,000 all at once, this is what we're talking about
Absolutely.
right now. So don't worry about, you don't have all of this in the bank right now. But again, your death could trigger a major financial event through life insurance.
Exactly. And life insurance is an interesting one because I see a lot of clients who come to me and they say, I have a life insurance policy, and my first question to them is, well, who do you have as the primary beneficiary of this policy? And they'll say, oh, my kids are the primary beneficiary.
Right.
And then I'll say, well, how old are your kids?
Right.
And they'll be like, oh, they're 3 and 4.
Right.
And I'm like, what sense does that make? You can't give a huge sum of money to a minor child. What happens in those instances, unfortunately, is that then a court is going to have to come in and appoint a guardian to receive those life insurance policies. So how do we work against that? We create trusts, we create wills that trust for your children could be the primary beneficiary of this life insurance policy, so that, like Janai was saying, we can actually spread out how that $300,000 gets to your kid over time, instead of them just getting a lump sum at a minor age of 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
Next, we've got married with adult children. Again, some of the similar reasons why you would want to do some estate planning. Again, giving your spouse the opportunity to control assets. Again, controlling that manner and timing of distributions. And also dealing with family issues. So this we see a lot. So you've got adult children. They may be married. You may not like your adult children's spouses.
Right. Yep.
So if anything was to happen, and again, your adult son or daughter gets $300,000, guess who's entitled to half of that now? Mm-mm. Their spouse. Yeah. So again, we need to work on making sure that we keep assets controlled, and that there are limitations around how possibly adult children can gain access to assets, and also protecting it from their creditors, and spouses can be considered creditors.
Okay. Lots to think about, ladies. Yes. But we can make all of these decisions. We can manage this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Next up, married, no children. Again, giving spouse the opportunity to control assets, establishing distribution plans. Maybe you want to include other family members if you don't have children. If you've got elderly parents, maybe setting up some trust to take care of elderly parents or siblings or nieces and nephews, paying for nieces and nephews' education, things like that come up often when we see clients that are married but don't have children yet. Next up, this is the big one, blended families. You see lots of drama here because you've got children possibly from a previous marriage. You've got previous spouses that you want to make sure that don't get access to funds. This is where it gets really, really sticky. And I often recommend, if you have blended families, to really, really consider getting wills and trusts in place.
Yeah. I have witnessed the greatest drama with the blended families. You know, particularly now that you have 2 different sets of children. Everybody was getting along famously. And now one of the parents passes away, and now all hell has broke loose, and everyone wants what they feel that they're entitled to. Let the will determine that.
Right.
There's nothing to fight about. The will is here. This is who gets what, and we can just keep moving from there.
Absolutely. That is definitely where the most drama takes place, is with blended families. And you may be single with no children, which is perfectly good. And then here you may also want to, like I said, take care of parents, take care of siblings, nieces and nephews if you want. Single with children. I'm sorry. Here, also taking care of your children, making sure you've got guardians in place, making sure we've got trusts in place to take care of minors. Again, controlling that timing of distribution. That's the biggest thing when it comes to having minor children. And then next up, we've got unmarried with partners. This is a really interesting one because you don't have a lot of the same, I guess, quote unquote, benefits that come with marriage here. Right. But still, that doesn't mean that you can't treat your partner the way that you would treat a spouse. Per se.
Right.
So again, but it's going to be much more important here that you are dictating it in a will, because if you die without a will, that partner gets nothing. Because if you die without a will, that's called intestacy. And every single state has intestacy laws. So what does your particular state say about how your assets should be distributed if you do not have a will? And I assure you, every single state, all 50 states, state the first thing is, if you die without a will, that your assets go to a spouse, if you have one. Here, you have a partner that you treat as a spouse, but they don't get that same benefit of being, quote unquote, a spouse. So you've got to make sure you draft around those intestacy laws to make sure that you've got your partner in the same position as if he or she was a spouse.
Right. Just because you've hinted on this, so somebody passes away, there is no will, so now the court says it goes to your spouse. There is no spouse. Who's next in line?
Next in line in most states would be children if you have children.
Okay.
If you do not have children, in most states, again, this is not every state, it's going to go next to your parents.
Parents, okay.
If you have no parents, then it's going to siblings. If no siblings, nieces and nephews, and it continues to go down that line.
Right. So what I hear you saying, Tiffany, is now a judge is going to make a decision about your money and who's going to get it, whether you want that relative to get it or not.
Absolutely.
The judge doesn't care about that.
Correct.
They're literally just going to follow
the law.
The law. Okay. And what about people who pass away and they have minor children and they have not appointed a guardian? Who typically gets appointed?
So the court is going to appoint a guardian there too. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be someone your family doesn't know.
Right.
It could be someone in the family who is willing to step up in that role.
Okay.
Of course, the court is going to judge that person, make sure they're fit to handle the role of being guardian.
Right.
But again, the final decision, if you do not have a will and if you do not appoint a guardian, is going to be with a judge.
The judge is going to make a decision.
Yeah.
So like my mother always used to say, keep those folks out your business.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You're going to have to make some decisions yourself.
Exactly.
Right. I can't imagine how much it must cost
Oh,
when there's not a will, somebody passes away, to have to go to court, to go to probate court, to deal with the judge. You're already stressed, under duress, and now thousands of dollars later, you're still dealing with this, waiting for someone don't know to make a decision about your family.
Absolutely. It is very time consuming, and it is very costly. I don't know the exact stat, but having a will or having a trust is going to at least half the amount of time and effort, and it's probably closer to doubling if you don't have a will, the time and effort for sure.
Okay.
So it's very, very important. Next big reason, special needs. This we see often too. So if you've got family members or loved ones or children who are physically or mentally challenged in any way, you're going to need to make sure that you have documents in place to avoid running afoul of any governmental benefits, to protect them from receiving funds that they are physically or mentally incapable of handling. And it's going to just help them in the long run and help the people that are in place to take care of them to manage special needs.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. Major decisions to make.
Major decisions.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that a disabled child, if they receive money, that could disqualify them from certain government supports.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's huge.
Yeah. So those are the slides that I wanted to go over before we get into the forms. I just wanted to give some backdrop and some background as to why these things are so important. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard about it. You've talked about it with friends, families, loved ones, but I just wanted to kind of break down every single scenario so that you can't say, well, I don't have kids, or, oh, I'm not married, or whatever the case may be. There is a reason, every single time.
It applies to you.
Yes.
So it sounds like we have a lot of decisions to make. And the only thing that I'm thinking about, although I've been through this process, when I hear you talk about all these documents, I'm wondering, how much is this going to cost me to get all this done?
Yeah.
Because I know the fear of the cost has kept a lot of women from taking care of this. Can you kind of give some perspective?
Sure.
And I know it depends. Some people have very complicated situations. Some people's like one and done, very easy. How much is this going to cost?
Brass tack.
I know.
Well, there's many different ways to get these things done. Obviously, there are the online resources like LegalZoom, et cetera, where you can get a will or a trust done. And I'm not going to denigrate those at all. Those work for certain people. There are certain instances where I would recommend hiring an attorney, like the blended families, like the tax issue concerns, like business succession planning. Those are reasons why you might want to pay a little bit more or pay a premium to hire an attorney to kind of talk you through all of those scenarios and what's the best way to work around them. I can tell you most firms in Atlanta that I know of charge anywhere between $2,000 upwards of $10,000, really depending on how complex it is. But it runs the gamut of, there's the solo attorney who runs a solo shop who can probably get it done cheaper. And then there are firms like mine that are bigger that cost a little bit more. But that's usually the range for a will, a trust, a power of attorney, which you guys are getting for free today. Right, okay. A healthcare directive, which you're getting for free today.
Right.
That's usually the package. And if we've got a couple, that the package is one for the wife, one for the husband, or the husband, wife. Right. So that's usually the package that goes anywhere between $2,000 to upwards of, we've charged somewhere around $10 for them as well if they get a little bit more complicated.
Okay. So
is that a one-time fee or is that monthly?
Oh, very good question. The question was, is that a one-time fee or monthly? That is usually a one-time fee to get that set of documents done. What could increase that fee is if you come back a couple years later and you say, I want to make some changes to these documents, then likely an attorney is going to charge you an hourly rate to amend the documents.
Right.
So the question is, if you're making edits to your will on a LegalZoom or any other internet platform, what do you do then because it needs to be filed with the court? A clarification there is it is filed with the court at the time of your death.
Yes.
Not while you're alive.
Right.
Because remember, again, wills can be changed at any point.
Right. Okay.
So it's only filed when you die.
All right, one more question.
Okay.
Lisa McGee asks, do you need to have an estate planner complete the forms and keep it on file?
That's another great question. The question is, do you need an estate planner to complete the forms and keep them on file? So the power of attorney and the healthcare directive forms that you all have, we're going to talk around the big generalizations around the parts and the provisions of those documents. I recommend that you review them, and it is something that you absolutely can do on your own. You do not need an attorney to finalize these forms. You will only need, like we stated before, possibly 2 witnesses, disinterested witnesses, and a notary. If you do meet with an attorney and you have an attorney prepare your forms, many attorneys will keep the originals for you if you want them to. You can also take the originals. I will state another tidbit that I tell clients all the time, a lot of free legal.
Y'all get a lot of free advice today.
Get a lot of free advice.
Listen,
jot it down.
Y'all are going to thank us later for all this free advice.
Exactly. Yes. What I see people do all the time is they will take that healthcare power of attorney or their durable power of attorney, and they'll go stick it in a safety deposit box. That is the absolute worst thing you can do. The reason is because those documents are documents that you need in an emergency. God forbid something happens to you, you're in the hospital in the middle of the night. None of your family members, I promise you, can get in your safety deposit box at that time.
Yeah.
So what I recommend is if you don't have one already, you can go on Amazon and just order a fireproof safe, a small one just that can fit documents in, and keep that in your house and put these documents in there. And tell your loved ones, your spouse, that's where the originals are.
Where you keep your documents is really important. I see so many families stressed out trying to find things. And we're not even talking about when people have passed away. You could have just been in a car accident. Maybe you just had surgery. Maybe you've had COVID and they cannot get their hands on them.
Yeah.
One thing that pulling my documents out, because when we start preparing documents, I realized that I made some decisions in here, but I didn't have conversations with all the people that I needed to talk to. So like my husband, of course, is listed first, but if he's incapacitated, I have my best friend who knows, but my aunt is also listed. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I did not even talk to her about that.
Right.
And so it's important that you're making these major decisions. Also schedule the time to have the important conversation. Yes, I've picked you.
Yeah.
You're my executor. You're my
Right.
healthcare power of attorney. If, my husband can't act, my forms are here. I'm like, I didn't even do that for my aunt.
Well, here's the thing, and I will say this for some people. Sometimes you don't want to tell them. Because like you said before, when you go back 5 years from now and you say, well, actually, I don't really want that person.
Right.
And then they're over there for the rest of their life thinking they're your executor when you've already changed them.
Right.
So sometimes you don't want to tell them.
Right.
So what I tell clients sometimes is to tell your loved ones, hey, if something happens to me, here's where my documents are.
Gotcha. And then
they'll get it and they'll see who you've named.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they can get to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ani, what's your comment about that?
I want to know if I'm your executor. Don't just be listing me, okay?
I need to know what I have a job to do. Do not keep me in the dark.
That is hilarious.
Oh, gosh. All right, ladies. So we are getting ready to transition. It's time to get to work.